Hey guys, so welcome to the Student Side Hustle. This week I'm speaking with Ben Esgro. He is the founder of De Novo Nutrition and just an absolute genius. Like, damn, this conversation, usually I have an intro on the podcast, but we were just having such a good conversation before the podcast, I just thought I'd just let it roll. If you like this sort of style, then I might do this more often and just sort of let it roll straight into it, but yeah. Hope everyone's having a lovely night and enjoy this amazing episode. I would recommend that when you're listening to the start of it, keep in mind it's sort of like a preface for the beginning of the podcast. But yeah, enjoy.
People are constantly raising the bar.
Sacrifices need to be made.
What would you guys say are your biggest weaknesses? You or your enemy right now?
The success of life.
Just a fucking podcast.
And maybe this is something we can touch on too when we're talking, and it may or may not come up, and that's fine if it does or doesn't. But to be honest, like, I think the older I get and the more I watch and am part of the fitness community, I see those abuses of power.
Right.
And I think for many people they're hard to avoid because it's an ego-driven thing.
Right.
And I think the more I stay involved and the longer I'm in this weird, maybe fucked up sounding way, I'm trying to be the antithesis of the fitness authority. Because what I want more than anything is I don't ever want people to stop questioning me or stop being skeptical of me, because that's how you get the best answers.
Yeah, definitely.
When you just blindly obey, that's when everybody's in trouble.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I think the good thing about like people like yourself and like 3DMJ and like all that sort of group, it's like I think that's something that I've realized recently, like when interviewing people like that, it's like they all understand that there is no black and white, it's all grey, like everything. And it's like there's some things that are set in stone, but it's like the majority of things, it's all like context dependent, and it's like there's so many variables to everything, and I think that's what makes it so interesting and like so hard to grasp at such a high level.
I think the deeper I get in and the more I know, the less confident I am that I know.
Right.
And I think the biggest challenge of when there's an expectation that I'm going to have an answer for somebody and give it to them in this neatly packaged, concise response, I think the biggest challenge is as much as I want to give that person that, it's nearly impossible.
Right.
And at the same time, it's almost like this internal fight of where I want to answer their question, but I don't want to kill their curiosity, and I also don't want to be wrong. When I give them the answer.
Yeah.
And just like you said, there's so much gray, and it's so context dependent that it usually ends up being this wishy-washy discussion that feels like you're like navigating around an answer rather than answering something.
Yeah, I get what you mean, because I think like when you first get into fitness, right? When I first got into this, it was like you'd watch a YouTube video and it would say, this is the best chest workout for X, Y, and Z, or whatever. You've got to eat chicken and broccoli or whatever the fuck, like, or you don't have to eat chicken and broccoli, and it's all black and white. And I think the more you go into it, it has to be those discussions though, because I think it's like then you can pick what works for you or what is best for that context. And like I think it's so fascinating that it is that complex. And like I used to think fitness was like, oh, you get in and you just lift weights and you eat chicken, but it's like, fuck, like people at the top level, the stuff that they know, it just blows my mind. Like,
you know what though? Like, I think what I'd say to that is you seek that in the beginning because that's your threshold. That's what you need. You can't, like, I do think when you get to a certain level, these conversations probably aren't appropriate.
right.
Meaning, if people are seeking that elevator pitch answer, they're not ready yet to get the nitty gritty. And
Yes.
but I don't think that means you shouldn't do it. I think because the reality, and what I'm finding too in business, not just in my own scientific pursuit and in a lot of these podcasts that I'm doing, is there's a definite level of frustration when I see what is succeeding and what's blowing up, but I have to check myself and realize that people still need that other side, because eventually they will get there.
Yeah.
So you have to see the big picture in the long term. You can't get lost in the what's going to be most engaging, the numbers game, because the reality is at some point people will learn past that and they will move on. So I think if you ask me strategically, what is my end goal in education and business, it's play the long game, not the short game. Because there's enough people playing the short game, and they're all trying to get millions of hits and views and followers. And dude, honestly, fuck that. Like, I'm not in this to be popular. Like, I want people to get truth, because I was starving for it when I was a consumer, and I think there will always be a demand for that. The truth will never go out of fashion. Yeah. It's just, if you don't know what you don't know, you're not ready for it yet.
Yeah, like, I think until you realize, like, how much there is to learn, it's like you cannot comprehend how little you know. And I think it's... No. Do you mind if I leave, do you mind if I leave most of this in? Because I think this is a really good preface, because it sort of sets the stage of so many of these conversations. I think, especially if people go into it relatively new to this sort of stuff, they cannot understand like why it has to be so grey. And I think that was a really good preface as to why that happens.
You know, I think the other thing I want to say too is, because you brought up Eric, and I had a really good conversation with Eric probably a year or so ago. This is when we were doing like the Elements panels, which was like a pretty big hodgepodge of everybody. Right. A lot of authority figures in fitness answering kind of questions, whatever came in to us. And I think it was before the recording, and we were talking about the responsibility to answer someone's question. Right. And he said something to me that made me check myself. And I think it's really stuck with me. And it's something I have to think about every time I'm answering something, is your job is not to show somebody how much you know in answering the question. Ooh. It's to do your best to almost keep them going. Like, give them enough of the answer. Right. But don't just drag on in this indulgent response where someone walks away saying, oh, you know a lot, rather than, wow, I learned a lot. There's a very big difference. Yeah. And I do think there is a huge responsibility in that, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge, I think, for me, because the way I learn and remember is when I'm speaking and answering, I'm reviewing my knowledge. Yes. But at the same time, I've seen where some people can be turned off by that, because you've overloaded them with so much fact that it's now they're overwhelmed. So I think that was a really good anecdote and really good advice from him that definitely made me realize, oh shit, I'm probably guilty of this, so I should work on this myself.
Well,
so
I think,
anyway,
I think I'm definitely guilty of it as well. I think especially with my friends who don't know or know very little about fitness, it's like I'm very guilty of just throwing a knowledge bomb at them. And it's almost just like, my favorite book is Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. Absolutely phenomenal. And
I think it's the ruination of mankind. I really do. That might sound harsh, but I do.
I think it's
you need ego to achieve.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't even think you do. I think, like, in the way Ryan defines it in the book, I think it's like, it pretty much is delusional confidence, and it's like, I think so many people like to feed it, and I think I'm very guilty of doing it myself. Like, I love I get addicted to showing how much I've learned, and it's like, to people who don't know anything, you sound like you're just like this, talking at them like this, and they don't understand the terms you're using, and it's like it has no point. Like, I think it's purely to feed ego at that point.
It's indulgent, or as they say in Fight Club, it's mental masturbation.
Yeah.
But I think that I notoriously spend a lot of time myself because I need to reflect and see. I need to process and self-analyze. I need my own echo chamber, and I like to observe a lot. I observe via social media.
Yeah.
I observe in life. I tend to be fairly quiet, other than when it's one-on-one like this, and we can have a really good, engaging conversation. And I think that you have to remind me of the last thing you said, because I don't want to lose
Ego
that
is the
thought.
enemy. Ego being indulgent, feeding the ego.
Right. So I think one of the things I have to process and always keep in check is my knowledge closing my mind? Is it not allowing alternative hypotheses and possibilities to come in? And I think if the answer to that is yes, I find that I need to change either my exposure to people. I need to do something to challenge that, because I truly believe that knowledge is correlated with openness, and discovery, especially, because I'll go on, like today, even before the call, I went on a bike ride in the woods, or I'll go for a walk, and when I do that, I'm doing a lot of things for myself. One of them is just it's a process thing where it helps me process my thoughts better. But the other thing is, I go out and I still find that I'm looking at things as if I'm still a 5-year-old, where I plant or whatever's growing, but I look at it as if it's the first time I'm looking at it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think what has happened is it has opened up so many doors and possibilities, and it's the only reason why I keep going back to school is I need to keep those doors open, because as soon as I stay out, I find my mind starting to close, and I find myself deferring more to emotional judgment,
right? Yeah.
Rather than some type of rational, deductive thought process.
Yeah.
And it scares the shit out of me. Yeah. And as soon as I feel that happening, I freak out, because I know I'm getting further from truth.
Right.
And I think I have a good friend who's actually, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Dom D'Agostino.
Yes, I just saw him on Joe Rogan. Yeah.
Joe Rogan. Yeah.
With Lane.
He's
phenomenal.
Probably one of the brightest guys I know, but also one of the best humans I know. And one of my friends is his PhD student.
Right.
And we were having a conversation about learning through life, and I think critical pattern, meaning I think most people think your knowledge, as you go through, you read books, you go through courses, you get degrees, it's like this linear thing.
Right.
And what I find is the deeper I get into something, the more I find I have to flip back to the fundamental concepts and question them, and then work my way back up. So yes, the trend line over time is linear, but it's not this perfectly linear. It's almost like watching a stock go up on the ticker or on the trend over years.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's kind of the way we have to see any type of progress, and maybe to keep it as an analogy, fitness is that's really how strength and muscle growth and a lot of things go. Is you don't square one, but it's never just this perfectly linear progression pattern.
Yeah. Do you feel like
and I think expectation, to a degree,
Do you feel like you have to sort of figure? Do you feel like to go up in knowledge or to sort of learn more, you have to almost going back to ego a little bit, kill your ego in that area?
Yeah. You have to break yourself. You have to break yourself down.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be bluntly honest. This is my intrigue of psychedelic compounds.
Right, yeah.
And I'm not saying that's the only way that you can achieve that.
Yeah.
But I will say it's very humbling when you have to confront, as they call it, ego death, or really see yourself. And not in the way that I think the traditional person sees themselves, which is superficially looking at the mirror. I think when you see yourself, it's almost as the social reflection of when you are very introspective. And again, this can happen with or without psychedelics, but they are notoriously potent at that.
Right.
And you see yourself on the reflection of how you're socially perceived and received. And I think it's very interesting. Yeah. So, and I think I've found this in fitness. That's how I've gotten answers in anything I've ever done in life. Is I think you need to either literally or figuratively break yourself. And I literally did it in powerlifting. Yeah. That's how I learned so much about programming. And now I think it's more figuratively with intellectual pursuits.
Right.
But if you reach this point of saying I'm satisfied or I'm gratified or I'm excessively proud of my knowledge,
yes,
where then is the impetus to learn more?
Yes, definitely. I think the moment you think you know everything, you know nothing, or you cannot progress. Like I know a few things.
Exactly. You have ceased intellectual growth at that moment.
It's, I don't see the point of thinking this is the one style that works. Like I was talking to Jeff from 3DMJ the other day, and he put it a good way. He basically said, like, he used to be really sold on this one training style for like 10 years or something, and then he met Eric and Alberto and all that, and they were sort of like, hey man, try this, because he was doing well in that training style, but he had a lot of issues with that. And then they was like, hey man, try this, and he was like, wow, these guys are really good, they know all this stuff, blah blah blah. And then that sort of allowed him to upskill his knowledge, because he realized, okay, there are other things that work, and everything can work, sort of thing. And it's like, it's not just this there's never going to be like, hey, one thing works, nothing else can ever work. And I feel like that's been a big thing for me over the last even the last 3 weeks. Like, I don't know who I talked to first that sort of started off this sort of thing, but I think I had one conversation where I sort of realized this sort of concept, and now it's like, I feel like it's recurring so many times. And do you know Steve Hall, Revive Stronger? I think you've been on his podcast, actually. Yeah, he's one of our athletes. Yeah, I was on, I was listening to one of his podcasts, and I think it was that started the thing, and it's just, when you hear experts in a field talk, they're never talking in extremes. Yep. And I think Lane or Dom, one of them, either Lane or Dom, made a really good point at the end of the Joe Rogan podcast. They were basically saying, like, experts are never going to talk. They basically said all these things. Experts are never going to talk like this. If they're genuinely smart and honest and open in this field, they're never going to talk of all these things. And I thought that was such an interesting thing to sort of hear. And I think when you hear that, it's sort of, for most people, it's quite mind-opening. But I think it's hard to hear.
You'd hope, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but that's what the truth is. I mean, imagine if you actually were walking through, let's say you're shopping in a non-Amazon dominated world, in an actual shopping mall that still exists today, and you really know exactly what that person thinks of you, rather than their let's say socially censored opinion of you. Imagine how much that would hurt nearly everybody if there was something they were self-conscious about and they heard constantly that person thinking that, or they knew that person was thinking that. So I think again, it goes back to just the general theme of what we were talking about before, is you have to learn how to swallow some very difficult things to move on, to actually, you have to kind of defeat yourself in order to, or get over yourself in order to learn. And I think that's a huge part of the appeal of knowledge is not so much, don't get me wrong, it feels great to feel like you have a grasp of understanding things and then apply and do something with it.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that it is, I think it's the one thing I found in life where there really isn't a finite endpoint. Like, you can always do better with it. You can always improve it. Whereas, like, we know that there's a ceiling for muscle mass that you'll probably naturally, that you can naturally achieve. We know there's a ceiling of a lot of physical, components of life.
Yeah.
And I think that's one that if you're committed to it, you can always find something, whether it's knowledge, whether it's relationships, some type of, intellectual aspect of life that can always be worked on. And I think, honestly, that's probably an adaptation from having the back injury too, where I had to find something where I could channel that energy.
Yeah.
And something where physical ability wasn't going to be my limitation,
Yeah, yeah. Could we touch on, because I think one thing is, I think for yourself, since you don't put a lot of emphasis on, like, how a lot of content creators will just, the content is all about them, but I think, as you said before, you're quite reserved. Could you give like a little background to your story, how you got into all of this, what with fitness and chemistry and all this sort of stuff? How did you get into this and why? And then you can take that wherever you want. If you want to start when you were 9 and you figured out deadlifting or whatever, or how did you get into this?
Yeah, so I think the seed was always planted in me from a young age, as far as like liking the look. Like I remember, and you could probably have someone like Jordan Peterson could probably have a field day with the psychoanalysis of this. But I distinctly remember when I was young, like probably around 5 or 6 years old, I loved the cartoons like X-Men and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and stuff like that. And obviously those are all hyper masculine characters.
Yeah.
Like even the dorky ones are huge and ripped.
Yeah.
So I always liked that look. And like I remember I was Wolverine. And so the look was always appealing to me. And I always found, like, even before I ever got into lifting or anything, I liked the physique of gymnasts. So I liked the classical bodybuilding look. Then probably a decade later, I think the start of all of it is usually me saying I'll never do that, and then I end up doing it and totally contradicting myself. So in my teenage years, I got into BMX, and that was really my first passion.
Right.
And I loved it. I think I loved the thrill seeker aspect of it, the risk taking, it was just super fun. It was just, and the network and community was amazing, because honestly, these guys are risking their lives. So you can't have a lot of drama, because everybody in a contest or when you're riding, everybody's kind of risking their life. So you don't need that extra bullshit.
Love that.
And so it removes a lot of the social garbage, I'd say.
Yeah.
And around the time I was in the middle of high school, and everybody was getting cars, and I knew that was going to be a threat to BMX, because that just seemed to always be this thing where people would stop riding once they got a car. And Fight Club came out about that time too, and I remember that at that time everybody was talking about Brad Pitt in Fight Club. Like, that's the physique. obviously there's always some Hollywood movie that drives the new perfect physique.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, oh shit, I want to get lean. So that's when I wanted to, and then I was like, oh, I'm really skinny. Well, now I need to learn how to grow muscle. Thinking that all these things are going to be like, oh, it's just going to be a year of figuring it out and hard work. And I think that part where it just, the more I got in, the deeper it kept getting. Because at the start of a fitness journey, when you're trying to figure it all out, there's obviously tons of conflicting information.
Yes.
And especially where I was going at that time was like Men's Health and bodybuilding.com forums, which were actually amazing. I mean, that's where I found a lot of the guys now, like Eric, Berto, Lane, Dom, they were all on there. So it's crazy. Like, we were lucky to have that in our age group. So I think I just kind of got hooked. Like, I was notoriously incredibly weak. Like, I couldn't bench. I weighed about, when I really started in the beginning, I weighed around 170s, and I couldn't, I would get pinned with 135. I'm like 6 foot tall. So it's really weak. I got pinned with 135 for like over a year, my first year of training. On bench, that is. So I think, again, that made me kind of hungrier to improve. And it all started with the drive of wanting to be a bodybuilder and just, again, driving towards the look of being muscular and lean. And then the more I found all of these networks and stuff, the deeper I got in. And then I kind of found that the biggest appeal of bodybuilding for me was achieving the look, not so much the show. Like, I hated the competitions. I didn't want to stand on stage like and flex and do the 1 minute routine. The show was always very anticlimactic for me. It was always the process of like getting lean, seeing new details and stuff in my physique. So, and honestly, I loved what it did for my brain too, because it made school, like, the reason I went to school for nutrition was, for my undergrad, was because of bodybuilding. Because I wanted to learn more, and I knew that was something that was it would sustain me. I think one of the ironic things is, like, I wasn't a great student in high school. I didn't love school. I didn't find it very engaging. And I didn't see the relevant purpose for my life. And again, you're going to see this theme that seems to be continuous for me is, like, I hated chemistry. I was like, oh, what does this mean to me? Like, why do I need to know the ideal gas law? Like, what the hell does this mean in my life? So I think I owe a lot to fitness and bodybuilding in that it turned my mind on. It gave me a thing that made all of these things relevant and relatable. So I think my time and interest in bodybuilding was kind of winding down after competing my second time, which I was around 26. And I was looking for something else. And I think one of the things I hated so much about bodybuilding was it's completely subjective. And I really wanted to be judged on some type of objective grounds. So at that time, Lane was doing powerlifting in his off season, and that really, turned me on to it, and I started getting into powerlifting, and really liked it a lot more. I liked the training more. I liked all of the variables were much more objective. It was much. It was also, I think, much easier to structure in a way that you can study and tease out variables and get endpoints in training. Meaning, like, I'm going to do X amount of sets and reps at this volume, and I can measure it as the point of strength, where hypertrophy is such a finicky variable because obviously hydration and everything else comes into it. So, like, when you just measure a muscle group, there's so many things like edema and short-term muscle damage, so many things that go into play there. It's dirty, whereas it's a much cleaner way to set up almost an experiment with powerlifting type strength training.
Yeah.
And I had just got into competing and got connected with Zordos as well. And we would train together via Tango, this video chat thing, and Skype. And we would really explore a lot of theories that we had on training and things that we were both playing around with.
Yeah.
In our own, I'm going to use the term lab, where it was really my basement gym, but it functioned really as a lab for me because I had a Tendo and I had, calibrated equipment and I had.
Right.
Anyway, the biggest question for me was what drives strength? Like, what is the fundamental underlying variable that's driving strength?
Right.
And a lot of Mike and I's conversations always rotated around volume.
Yeah.
And at the first VIP camp that Lane did, Mike and I both presented, and Mike gave a phenomenal presentation. If anybody's ever seen him, he's a great lecturer.
Yeah.
And that really solidified a lot of things for me. He talked about certain studies that actually were done at my undergrad school, and things that just solidified, okay, I'm chasing the right variables and stuff here.
Yeah.
So I needed to test the limits because at that time there wasn't the robust amount of literature on powerlifting there is now.
Right. Yeah.
Especially like related to what's driving strength and stuff.
Right.
So and everybody was probably because largely of bodybuilding dogma, they were panicked about overtraining and all that stuff, and the stuff that I was always finding, because anecdotally I was finding when I was doing these higher volume programs, higher frequency programs, that those were things that were always making me stronger and always making me develop my physique better.
Yeah.
So stuff like Smolov Jr.,
right,
Chico, all the like the spreadsheets going up to going up to even like the most advanced ones, and I was buying every book I could and just reading stuff and trying to implement it every training block, and I was getting a lot of answers and figuring stuff out, but one of the answers I wasn't getting is where's the ceiling? Like, where's too much?
Right. Yeah.
And
you mean
then
too much strength or too much?
Too much.
Volume.
What level of stimulus is too much?
Okay.
Yeah. And or even just not even just volume, but frequency. Like again, we'll encapsulate everything by calling it stimulus, which is frequency, volume,
load,
intensity. And I spent a couple years doing some pretty crazy stuff, like training 70 days a week, doing double sessions Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, doing crazy levels of volume, working up to maxes on all 3 lifts every day of the week, and then backing off and doing volume sets. Doing stuff that no one, and I'd never subject anybody else to, the stuff that gave me confidence in my knowledge. Like, okay, when I'm trying to do this for somebody else, what's going to happen here? Like, I need to develop some level of predictability other than what a textbook is telling me. Like, what actually happens to an organism when you subject them to this level of stress? And I did this all on a diet, like I was talking for a bodybuilding show. So I think if there's one thing to take away from all that, it's that you can do way more than you think you can.
Right.
Like, people stop themselves short way low. And I think the Bulgarian stuff proves this. And that's a lot of what Mike and I talked about too. He was doing insane stuff with Bulgarian, like squatting twice a day every day and stuff like that. So we did crazy stuff.
Yeah.
However, it's why I know with a level of confidence that maybe some people would call arrogant, I know what's going to happen.
Yes.
And when I'm loading somebody, or when I'm going to put somebody under a higher level of a more intense block to get some response out of them. So anyway, I think moving on to kind of the next thing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there's one important note to put in there is being a tall guy, being long, and subjecting myself to that stuff. I knew at some point something was going to give.
Yes.
I had a pretty terrible back injury that I'm still trying to kind of figure out ways to work around.
Right.
But I got my answers. So people say, like, a lot of times, like, would you change anything going back? I got what I was looking for. I
Right,
mean,
yes.
don't get me wrong, it's upsetting to have a chronic. I think it was inevitable because I'm the type of person that I have to know, and I will sacrifice everything to know.
What
so
was the if you don't mind me asking, what was the injury, and then has it basically, how much has it stopped you lifting wise?
Yeah, so the injury was, I'm going to try to give you the shortest answer because it's really long.
Right, because I'm quite interested in back injuries because I have scoliosis. I'm fused from T3 to L2, so it's a big focus for me. So especially like minimizing, and I get quite a few because there's not really anyone with scoliosis who lifts properly, and well, there is obviously Brad Loomis, etc., but there's not many. But it's a big focus of myself personally to figure out how can you become the best bodybuilder, powerlifter, etc. with this, and can you, sort of thing. Like, is it possible, or is it just genuinely you have to accept that you're limited?
That's a tough one for me to answer. I'm gonna answer the first question.
Yeah.
And I think, channeling back to the beginning of the conversation, I think the real answer to that question is it depends.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
Anyway, so I had what I was referring to as spasms every couple months, or maybe a few times a year after I started powerlifting. And I think in reality those were disc bulges. Wow. And I just didn't know how to properly, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
So I let it heal, sort of, and continue training. And that the worst event I had a spasm early in the week. I was maybe 5-6 weeks out of my shows, so I kind of felt like I needed to train. So I would like double up my belts. I'd wear like a Tommy Kono neoprene belt, and then an Inzer lever belt over top of it.
What?
And I'd get to my training. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, these are really. I mean, I've done some dumb shit.
Well, it's all in pursuit of knowledge, so I think it did have a point.
Right. So I got through my training, and then later in the week I had deadlifts. I went pretty light, and I got through the training. I recorded a podcast. I went upstairs to re-listen to the podcast, tried to get out of the chair, and I collapsed. Like, I got maybe an inch or two off the chair, and I just collapsed. Like, I basically felt like a shock go through my whole body that generated at my lower back. I lost pretty much all muscular control and fell to the ground.
Holy.
I rolled around for like 2 hours just moaning. I was still living at home at the time. My parents are like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I couldn't even tell them.
Oh my god.
So I finally found a position where I could lay and I wasn't in agony. And I remember saying to my mom, like, I think I broke my back. I think I broke my back. And they tried to stand me up, and they got me stood up, and I started blacking out.
Holy.
So we put a mattress on the ground. I flopped onto the mattress and didn't move. Like, I had to pee into like a jar because I couldn't get up to go to the bathroom. Yeah. And then we called the ambulance in the morning, and I got imaging, and they basically just gave me anti-inflammatories and painkillers they were going to admit me, but I was able to leave by the end of the night. I didn't get much from the original imaging, but I found out when I took that to Stu McGill a couple years later, I got a better analysis of the imaging, and basically all of the discs in my lumbar spine were bulging. 3, 4, 5 were herniated. And 5S1 was ruptured, and there was a fracture between 3 and 4.
Wow.
So when I said I think I broke my back, I was right. I knew. It's weird. Like, deep down inside, when I was laying on the mattress that night, I remember thinking to myself, your life is not going to be the same after this.
Right.
And it's weird. For like a year or two, I got away with it fine. Like I was okay. I found out there were weird adaptations I was making. Like I found when I'd record myself from the back, when I'd squat, the bar would be like 2 inches off center to one side.
Yeah.
I think just to take the compression off of that side. But of course, it added up over time. Yeah. And then I just started having chronic pain, and it limited me pretty severely. Now I'm at the point where I really can't deadlift. I can't squat. If I do, it's light. It's very infrequent.
Yes.
I can kind of bench. I can train, but I have to really like work around a lot of things, and I really have to prioritize basically good postural hygiene is what I call it.
Yes.
Because if I'm in a bad position, like just in the beginning of the week, I was doing an assignment for my class. I was printing off a note. I went to move up out of my chair to get the note out of the printer, and I spasmed, and I basically spent the night. Yeah, so it's definitely changed my life. I did have stem cell shots in 3, 4, and 5.
Right.
I think it improved a little bit, but unfortunately not to the point where I would have liked it to.
I think personally, so this for me, I can definitely relate to that, because I don't think it's as intense for me, not nearly, but I think I'm in danger of having a similar thing happen, because like if you look at the research, I might be wrong on this, but if you look at the research of disc bulging and basically destruction of the, I don't know what you call it, the actual term, but
degeneration.
Degeneration of the discs below and above a fusion, it's pretty shit. Like they get wrecked.
Yep.
And it's like, it scares the shit out of me. So I basically don't deadlift, I don't squat, because they feel like shit. And like, I can definitely relate to that sort of feeling. And it's like, it really annoys me, because like naturally I'm a tiny guy, right? And it's like the feeling of, it's almost, it pisses me off, because I get to the point where I definitely know more than all of my friends about the gym, but a lot of them will lift more than you. And it's like, fuck, that feeling, it really annoys me. But it's sort of the kind of thing where I just had to let it go, and what can I do? Like, either just learn more or be a better athlete, or fuck, like, I don't know, like, it's that sort of thing where you're limited by an injury or limited by this shit. It's fucking, especially when it's like, I'm assuming it's similar for you. It's like the main thing that you care about in life. It's like, it's such a huge passion for you. It's like, so that's just, and it's like, it is honestly painful, because it's like you've found this really cool thing, and then it's like you've immersed yourself in it, and then it's like it's been ripped away, and it's fucking, it's painful. Like I don't think mine isn't to the degree that yours is, but fuck, like I feel for you, like, because fuck, like it's like you found this amazing thing that gives you so many benefits, and then it's like it's just like there's this one thing that's happened, but it's been like a bunch of things that's happened, and then it's caused a big event. But
I think that there's a beautiful aspect of losing the thing that you care about most.
Ooh.
And that could sound very confusing, I think.
It is, yeah.
But I think the thing that it does for you is it really makes you evaluate what you want out of life, and how to move forward. And I think it shows you who you really are as a person.
Right.
Because life would be very easy if you could always do everything you love doing, and you can always have everything you love.
Right.
The reality of life is that's not that nothing great can last forever, and that's true of essentially everything I know.
Yes,
Like everything has a lifespan.
Yes.
So I think it's forced me to have some difficult time with myself, and to be honest, there's a lot of ones that I'm still working on, because I'd be lying if I didn't say that it changed me as a person.
Yes.
Chronic pain changes you. There's no way to escape that.
Right.
And losing something that you love changes you. But I refuse to be the person that gives up from that.
Yes.
I can't be that person. I have to figure it out. And I, as much as I hate it, I love the challenge of having to figure it out.
Right.
And I think for me, they're always sometimes not the way you want them packaged, but they're answers to things. And I think to me, when I say I got my answer, I didn't just get my answer with, in science. I got my answers in life, in that, like, maybe you're just not meant to be the powerlifter that you want to be. Maybe your purpose is not meant to be a bodybuilder. And I think a lot more people in fitness need to accept that. Like, you have to understand that the people that you see succeeding with these amazing physiques and these influencers, they are outliers. They are not the mean. Most people will fall within the mean.
Yes.
This is, whether you like it or not, again, this is a very genetically determined endeavor, both strength and physique. And I think there's a lot of delusion in the community, and I think that's utilized by a lot of companies to manipulate consumers. And in a lot of ways, honestly, I don't like it, and I find it pretty disgusting. But I think for anybody who's interested in that, a book I read that was very eye-opening and kind of helped for me it's called Gorilla Suit by Bob Paris. He was a bodybuilder in like the late 80s, 90s. He was an Olympia competitor. He was top 3 in Olympia. People may know him if they're familiar with the history of IFBB bodybuilding, because he was the first one who really came out as an openly gay, like, Olympia competitor. And he dealt with some adversity because of that. And he basically tells his life story, but he also tells how these realizations he had that even he was delusional. Again, this is a guy who was top 3 Olympia, talking about how he was delusional in the sport. If you're top 3 Olympia and you're delusional, how are all these people who can't even win a local show not delusional? You know what I mean? So I love the book. It's a really easy read. I would recommend anybody in fitness read it, because I think it will make you confront yourself in many ways. And it's called Gorilla Suit.
Gorilla Suit by Bob Paris.
Yeah, Bob Paris.
Okay.
Definitely recommend it. So anyway, I will always be thankful for that, because I do think it redirected me in life. And I think I'm going to segue just to the one thing I didn't address, the last part, which will take us up to today in my story. And then hopefully we can get to some of the questions that people asked.
No, I think this is better than, like, some of these questions you can, if you go down a far enough rabbit hole in Google, you can find an answer. But the experiences that you've been sharing, like, you can't find those on Google. So don't feel like you have to make this as short as possible. Just say what you want to say.
Okay. Well, so it's kind of nice to be able to, put it out there. So it was the point of, I was still powerlifting. I had in some recognition because at that time Lane was very successful. He was competing in Worlds. I was coaching him. A lot of people knew that, and it definitely brought a lot of attention. And Denova was growing because Dom went on to Tim Ferriss's podcast. He mentioned Utopia when we just released it. That's still our most popular product. We kind of overnight it changed the face of the company. And realize that, and I feel the need to, insert into there. A lot of these times I'm speaking of them as if they were each separate occurrences, but a lot of this was all happening at the same time. So like the formulating was happening at the same time as the powerlifting, kind of at the same time as bodybuilding. It's just there were definitely turning points where I focused on one more at in like a progressive fashion. So I always knew since I got into consuming supplements and really finding companies that were making good products, I always knew that the best formulators had a chemistry background.
Yes.
And after Utopia, I felt a lot of internal pressure, and I still feel it, to live up to that with everything that we release after. Of course, who wants to be a one-hit wonder? Who wants to fail after one thing kind of succeeds on a big level?
Yes.
And there is a definite level of anxiety with that, because I want to live up to what I think I can actualize as a formulator, and I want to keep doing that. I want to keep changing people's perceptions of what products can and should be.
Yes.
So after that, I think I started to realize that there was going to be a very real ceiling to my abilities with the current knowledge I had,
right.
Which was the undergrad in nutrition and then the sports nutrition.
Do you mean
masters?
Your formulator abilities?
Yes.
Yes.
Because what I was finding is the more I was going to dig deeper into either neurotransmitters or pharmacology, like interactions of stuff,
right.
the more I found is that I was almost at that beginning stage where the person who's just getting into fitness is, where
right.
I couldn't filter information properly.
Right.
So I was kind of wasting time because I didn't have this fine filtration system of information. And that is the one thing I think more than anything that education does, is it gives you a curriculum and it tells you, okay, here's the fundamentals, learn those, we're going to move up.
Right.
So I looked around for programs. I was going to go back for a bachelor's in chemistry. I did really well with my life, and it's in pharmaceutical chemistry. So basically, I like the hybrid program. So my nutrition master's was a combination of exercise phys and nutrition. This one is a combination of chemistry and pharmacology.
Right.
So I'm able to mix both worlds, which is directly relatable. We're not just talking about a lot of parts of chemistry that don't really apply for me. We're literally talking about drug development, like a pharmaceutical company does.
Yes.
So a lot of the information I've learned so far, and I can continue to learn, really, like, it's changed the game for me, and it's given me a new ceiling.
So is this the pharmacology side?
Again, like I said, I didn't even know where to start. I can't. It's the likelihood of us releasing a product, make things that I can small batch things.
Yes.
If I want to test them, and I can also play around with different derivatives of a compound. For example, derivative being, if you take, let's say, an amino acid,
right.
the derivative would be one atom change on the compound, and see how that changes, how it behaves.
Right.
And that stuff is very important because I can answer a question really quick without going out and needing to buy something, or having someone synthesize it for me, which is usually feasible, especially if I very economically feasibly. So I can make a salt of amino acids,
right.
And if I'm trying to find out solubility, I could drop it into water and test the solubility right there, which is much quicker, much
right.
easier than needing to go out, find it, buy it, have somebody make it.
Right.
So it works really well. So, and again, I think more than anything, what it's done for me, it has humbled me, to a level where I think I have an insanely greater appreciation for plants.
Right.
I think I realize in the scheme of things how significant humans think we are, but how insignificant we are. We're just part of this much bigger puzzle.
Yeah.
And I think I'm humbled by the fact that you can go outside and walk around in nature.
Yes.
And these things have been here so much longer than you have.
Yes.
And they have figured out ways to manipulate you in ways that you don't even realize are happening. And you ingest them for either enjoyment or for medicine. And we're still trying, as chemists in labs and everything else, we're trying to perfect things that plants do as a metabolic side product, and they do it so efficiently with such high yields that it makes me laugh at us, and in a way that I think in a healthy way, because even the brightest, most brilliant chemists, like, we still need plants to do them, and we still have to be mesmerized at the ability, like at the master chemist that plants are. Yes. So I love it. I mean, it's added another color in the spectrum of life for me.
Yes. Could I ask a specific question? There's one thing that I think have a weird relationship with is caffeine. I'll grab it. One sec. Hold up. Like, I used to take just one of these pre-workout, but now I'm taking like two, and now it's just moving up and up. And these are 200 milligrams per, I'm not sure, but it's caffeine and hydrose. Do you think? Yep. Do you think it gets to a point where you need to? I don't know, and correct me if what I'm saying is ill-informed or anything like this. Do you think it gets to a point where you need to reset your caffeine tolerance, or do you think it's at a point like I drank Coke? I used to go to my dad's office, right, and we would play RuneScape, and I'd drink a liter and a half of Coke. Obviously, horrible for you, and obviously that's got caffeine. So from a young age, my caffeine I was always drinking caffeine, right? We'd go and get energy drinks after school and whatever. And now, as a 19-year-old, I'm taking pretty much 400 milligrams of caffeine every day, except the weekends. Then I'll maybe have 100 milligrams, something like that. Do you think, what is your general, for lifting and for performance, and also I'm a student as well, and I do all this other stuff, like I'm trying to maximize my productivity and efficiency. How do you think people should structure their caffeine, or is there other stimulants that could work as substitutes or something like that?
I'm going to do my best to answer all of those questions. Right. The first place I'll start is there's a lot of variables that come into play when you're talking about the subjective experience you have when you consume. We're going to use the term drug because the reality is it's a drug. A drug is anything that really changes, physiology. And when there's a lot of things that play into that. The first one will be genetics. Not everybody metabolizes caffeine the same. There's slow metabolizers, fast metabolizers. Another thing that happens is when you put something outside that's not an endogenous compound in your body, not something that naturally floats around there already, which again would be classified as a drug, your body has to determine how to handle it. Yes. And if it's delivered orally, it has to go through first pass metabolism, which first pass usually means the gut and the liver. The liver has these enzymes that will metabolize, and sometimes, often it's working to break it down or to make the compound more water soluble so you can eliminate it.
Right.
Whenever you expose yourself to these things, a classical example is ethanol. You have what's called induction of the enzymes that metabolize it. Induction usually means it can work in both ways, but usually if it's something that is toxic or can kill you, you will induce the enzymes and you will increase the production of them or the efficiency of them metabolizing the compound. So a classical thing with alcoholics, or you find people who drink a lot, that they have a higher tolerance. That's because of induction of the enzymes that metabolize ethanol. That's why you get improved tolerance.
Right.
So that can certainly be at play there with caffeine.
Yes.
So you have the genetic component, you have that component of enzyme induction. Then you have a lot of lifestyle factors. So things like, are you sleeping enough? Because the mechanism, the currently accepted mechanism of caffeine is that it's an adenosine receptor antagonist. So the target, basically what happens is the longer you're awake, the more adenosine builds up at receptors and it makes you feel fatigued.
Okay.
We can go really long into that We'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
What caffeine does is it looks and behaves very similar to adenosine.
Yes.
So it blocks that receptor, so adenosine can't interact.
Right.
And that's why you feel more energized, and it will kind of help you feel more awake throughout the day because you're not allowing adenosine to accrue. So you have to understand that there's always competition that's going on.
Right.
However, if you are not sleeping enough, you're functioning at a lower level of open receptors for caffeine to block adenosine interacting with.
Right.
Because to my knowledge, caffeine will not displace adenosine from the receptor once it's coupled. I could be wrong there, but what that means, the practical take-home point there is if you're not sleeping enough, which most people aren't, and caffeine might be screwing that up, you're not going to get as much out of caffeine, and then it's going to require you to have a higher dose to get the response that you're used to.
Ooh.
So this is where people lose the respect for drugs, for any compound that produces some type of subjective response. Is you have what's called in pharmacology a therapeutic window, which basically means it's the window between the amount that produces a therapeutic effect and where you start producing toxic effects. Things like caffeine have a big therapeutic window or index. However, when you have escalating doses, even if you don't feel it, that caffeine's probably still getting into the plasma, into the blood, able to interact with other tissues and stuff.
Right.
So while you might not feel it, the higher you go in doses, the more you open up possibility for unwanted effects.
Yes.
So the best thing you can do is make sure the other things are in check first, like the way you live your life and your behavior habits, before you start escalating. I realize that's a hard thing for people to do because it's much easier to brew a cup of coffee, to take a pill, than to reevaluate and revamp your whole life. But that is the best answer. And ironically, we know that with nutrition too. Is everybody knows they shouldn't be going to Burger King for 4 times a week, but it's convenient and it's easy. And that's the reason we're obese. I don't think it's so much that we don't know better. It's that it's the convenience
it's hard
thing
to make that,
is
make that a habit or make that a lifestyle change. What would you say? So if you use me as a case study, I used to take 200 milligrams for like a year. Now it's 400 for the last 3, 4, 5 months, something like that. Pretty much every day. I've taken like 2 weeks off. Like, what do you think the best approach would be for me to have a healthier relation or a more effective relationship with caffeine? Like, I want to, because I'm not getting I feel like now when I go in the gym without caffeine, it doesn't feel as good, but when I take caffeine, it does. I think it's the something effect, the bike of something, the hedonic treadmill effect.
It's like psychosomatic, or it's like you take it because you're used to it and you think it almost makes you, it's like a placebo. So I think the best thing that's possible is you, just like before you ever started with caffeine, before you ever exposed yourself to it, your baseline was no caffeine. So you have to expect that for a period of time you're going to dip below baseline and it's going to suck a little bit. So I think it's the first place to start would be getting to a healthier relationship with caffeine, which is only really using it when you need it, and allowing yourself enough time off to where you can start training again, where you don't feel the impulsive need to take caffeine. So getting through the shit period where you can say, oh, I don't need this anymore. Like the psychological dependence aspect. Because the reality is there is withdrawal to caffeine. Again, it is a drug. It's just a very socially accepted drug.
I was in a pharmacology lecture. This person has studied pharmacology, and I said to them, they basically said, they was trying to argue that there was no withdrawal symptoms from anything other than like heroin, etc. And then I was like, no, there's obviously like withdrawal effects from caffeine. And like, I was like, I'm an uneducated kid who's taking a first year pharmacology paper. And like, how can you think there's, obviously if you're taking that much caffeine, like when I don't take caffeine, I get withdrawal symptoms. And it's like, obviously they're minor. It's not like taking crack, but it's obviously there. And I don't understand how they would think just because they're minor, they're irrelevant. Like
maybe it's just you might just be talking around each other. Like for them, it might be classical symptoms of withdrawal, like convulsing and just like opiates and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, so I think the best place to start would be making sure you're getting enough sleep, taking a time period off enough where you don't feel like you need caffeine anymore.
Yes.
And then you can do other things. You can get response from certain individual amino acids, one of them being tyrosine if you dose it high enough.
How high would you?
So you usually have to go like 9 to 12 grams a day.
Right.
I would split it up because, number one, it's not very water soluble.
Right.
Number two, you can get GI distress if you tried to go for all 9 to 12 grams in one sitting. You should feel something from around 3. So you can also try that if you find that you're having withdrawal issues.
Would you take it similar to how
period.
you take creatine, but like split it up into 3 gram doses or something?
Yeah, I'd say 3 times a day, anywhere from 3 to 4 grams in a serving.
Would it work as a? What is the purpose of it?
So tyrosine is the precursor to monoamines like dopamine and epinephrine.
Right.
So you will produce some by providing that precursor.
Right.
It's don't get me wrong, it's not like taking a shot of an EpiPen or taking, like an injection into your brain of dopamine.
Right.
It's not going to do that because you have to go through much. Yeah, exactly. You'll get short-term increases in that plasma amino acid, which will get into cells and will ultimately, at some lower percentage, get converted to those neurotransmitters.
Right.
So I think that's not a bad means. I do think you'd probably be better off too when you take it if you put it in something that maybe is fat soluble, because tyrosine is notoriously terrible water solubility.
Yes.
So even if there's like a little bit of oil, if you're cooking food, if you make a shake, it might work better in that.
Right. So if you put oil, meaning like, say if because I usually put olive oil in my shakes just for calories, which is disgusting, but it doesn't taste that bad. Would you recommend putting it in there?
That would help.
Okay.
Yeah. So tyrosine should be more soluble in that.
Soluble? Like, is that?
Yeah. So
okay.
It's more lipophilic, which basically means the same thing.
Right.
It's more soluble in fat than in water.
Wow. God, I feel like there's so much. I feel like I have to run to clinic, and it's like, I don't like. I was gonna bust the clinic at 12:10, but it's 12:26 now, and I was like, nah, fuck it, I don't want to end this conversation. So I was just call an Uber. Fuck, damn, this is such a good conversation. I feel like there's so much I still want to ask you. Damn.
Well, maybe we cut it when we have to, and we'll just finish the rest whenever.
Yeah. I'd love to have you on again. Like, damn, like, because I feel like with a lot of this stuff, like, you don't realize how much, like, with some people, you'll talk to them, right? And then say they've got 35,000 followers on Instagram, and you think, oh, they must know so much, they must be so interesting because they've got all these followers, but it's like, no, they're a good marketer. And I feel like only recently have I sort of realized, like you've only got, like, like 1,000 followers, but it's like the amount of respect and, like the amount of respectful people, like all of 3DMJ, like, all that, like, obviously they're a group that I know quite well, so I'm quite, like, I bring their name, but, like, there's just a whole bunch of people that I've seen your name dropped on, and it's, like, repetitively, so it's like,
yep.
Yeah, I think, damn, yeah, I'd definitely love to continue this conversation, because I feel like I really like the way you explain things, like, Eric said it in a good way. He said basically know how to pitch it at the right level, not trying to, and as we said earlier, like,
I try.
not trying to like throw your knowledge at someone. You're just trying to actually teach them, and not like,
Yeah.
And I think that's a very hard thing to do. Yeah.
Well, again, a recurring theme is I like the challenge.
Yes.
I ultimately, what I want to do is I want to turn your mind on, like mine has been from the things that I've done. So,
Yes.
I mean, think of it like socially. What's the best possible outcome of something like this? Is we all be a little more curious and we
Yes.
all think a little harder about this stuff.
Yes.
Like, because guess what? We all win then. There's not just one winner. Like, we all win.
Yes.
Like, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't like going on debates, because everybody wants to define, this person won, this person lost.
Yeah.
No, if that's the most you fucking got from that, you've missed the whole point.
Yes.
You missed the
Yes.
entire point.
Yes. 100%. I think Revive Stronger does a good job of this, because it's sort of like the way they sort of say it is they say, like, we agree on 99% of it, but it's just some things methods we disagree on, or then that's where what do you say? That's where productive discussion between experts occurs. And I think it's like, I think debates are useful, but it depends how you look at them. And I think
the other thing I almost feel obligated to touch on too is I think you have to, and it's all critical evaluation of things, but you have to consider, if this person has X amount of followers, what are they doing to satisfy that audience?
Yes.
And the reality is, if your intent is to have a lot of followers, you have to spend a lot of time catering to that. You have to spend a lot of time being on Instagram.
Yeah.
To me, that is a direct threat to learning, because that's not my outcome. That's not my goal. I'm not trying to have a lot of followers. I'm trying to learn more.
Yes.
And then if I can come on and provide value, that's what I want to do. So if I spend more time doing that, trying to cultivate that, it's a direct threat to me doing what I like and what I'm good at.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's something that isn't said very much, because I feel like people think the more successful you are, that means every aspect of your life is going like that. But I think there's so many things that's like I've sort of taken a step back of trying to, like, I used to write blogs and make YouTube videos and all these things, but it's like I wasn't making good content, and I wasn't learning, and I wasn't doing all these things, and I think for me it was just the wrong thing, and I've taken sort of a step back and tried to redirect myself to focus on the podcast, focus on the quality conversations, and also just focus on, like, I'm just trying to become a sponge and just learn as much as I can from people like yourself, like Eric, etc. Like, and I think there's, like, I think that these conversations, obviously I cannot grasp everything you're saying, right? But it's like, if I can grasp 5%, then it's like, that will help me grow much more than I would do it gaining 100 extra followers or whatever.
All that matters is it makes you think more about what you're spending your time doing, and what and just what is your thing, you know what I mean? And I get it. Right now the prize is followers, like right in generationally, that is within your demographic, and mine too, usually like 20 to 30 some. That is where social value is right now. Right. And maybe a decade ago it was MySpace, and before that it was Facebook. Like, this is an ongoing, this is like a sliding scale. It's going to change again. However, you have to look at, popular things will always be popular, and that will always drive a lot of the average demand of the person of success and what they should be going for. But I think if you look at an impact on something, if you want to make the greatest impact, you have to fulfill and follow your purpose, not the purpose of what everybody else thinks is valuable. Because at the end of the day, at the end of a life, what's going to be the most valuable socially and to you is what you were meant to do, what speaks to you the most, not what is appealing. Basically, if you're trying to do the popularity thing, you are trying to make other people happy by doing what other people want, at what point in that have you focused on what you want to do, what you're good at?
Yes. So it's like, and I feel like to grow, to maximize your following growth, you have to focus more general. I think a lot of the time you do, and I think that's
Absolutely.
like you can't niche down as hard as like a lot of these people have, and I think that like 3DMJ is a great example of that, right? Like I don't know many people who make better content than them, who are more well informed than them, but they're so niche. Like they make amazing content for hardcore bodybuilders, right? And obviously their content can be used for other people.
They know what they're good at.
Yes.
They know what they're good at, and they have stuck to their values.
Yes.
I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. And I think like in the long term it will play out. I can't see 3DMJ ever falling off, right? Unless they sort of decide, okay, we need to disband, we're too old or whatever. Like then I can't see them getting to a point where they're irrelevant, because they don't have, like, who was it? There's this guy, he calls himself King Keto now. He's very like big in fitness, and it's like he's basically, I think his message, and I haven't even looked into it, so I might be assuming, but I think his message now is basically saying, hey, keto's the best, just do keto. Like, I'm sure keto's great, but there's lots of grey, as we said, like, and I think, like, he's trying to, King Keto is trying to, like, just do that, and that is, in the long term, it's going to play out, because maybe keto's a fad. Like, I'm sure it's got lots of great benefits, but I think the popularity of it is higher than it normally is, right? I think it was popular back in the 90s or something, and it's like, I think right now it's what's popular, so he's capitalizing. Good for him, he's marketing, but how much is that going to play out in 10 years when keto's not popular anymore? Like, it's still going to work just the same, but is it popular? Like, nah.
I think the other question that I have to ask myself with stuff like that is, again, what's the long-term value you're providing? Because if you go through the thought line of that and come to the conclusion, it's that individual is trying to benefit them.
Yes.
They're actually not trying to benefit the greater good.
Yeah.
Because you're meeting the consumer, where I'm not saying that's a terrible thing, but what I am saying is, like, if you actually can teach somebody something, or you help them think better, or think through it and solve it themselves, you don't help them acutely, and like you change their life. Like, you can help them be better moving forward, which is very different than just getting them to buy the shit that's popular now.
Yeah, and I think, like, that's so true, because, like, and I think people know it deep down, but they don't realize it a lot of the time. Like, a business is a business, end of story. Like, it's there to make profit, and like helping people along with that can happen, but there's degrees of it, right? Like, I think De Novo does a great job of, like, the products fucking work. Like, they're not, you're not selling bullshit, right? And I think that's the thing that I really, really like about it. Obviously, I can't really buy them because I'm in New Zealand, but, like, I'd love to. Like, I wish we had good companies like you guys here. Like, we have, the New Zealand fitness industry is trash. The company, like, I went into,
hopefully we can.
Yeah, please just get some shit in NZ, because we have this store, NZ Muscle, and, like, I go in there, and I'm fucking like, oh my god. And in one shelf, they've got, like, Psalms, but I think it's a fake anagram, but people think it's Psalms, real Psalms, but it's not Psalms. Or maybe it is, and it's just, they're selling fucking Psalms. Or, like, and then another one is, like, they've got this one called Test Ripped Freak, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And they still sell fat burners every day, like, Jesus. I think it's honestly ridiculous. Like, and then you compare it to you guys, like, the fat burning, right? It's trying to solve a problem. But then you compare it to Suppress, where it actually has a point, like, it's actually useful, and it's addressing the problem, which is overfeeding, not trying to overstimulate them to burn all the calories. Like, oh,
right,
fuck.
Which isn't going to work anyway.
No, it's just like,
again,
fucking hell.
Yeah, it's an interesting industry to be part of.
Yes.
And I think there's two things that I want to say. How much time do we have left?
I need to be at class in 20 minutes, and I have like a 15.
Do you want to stop here?
Kinda. Fuck. I don't want to, but I have to.
Okay.
Because I've got my Uber app right here, and I'm just like, yeah.
That's totally okay. No. Let's stop. Go to class.
Okay.
We'll pick up again.
Sweet. Quickly. Usually I would skip class or something like this, but this is like a mandatory. You must go, or else you get kicked out of the class. So, fuck.
Go to class.
I'm basically using my degree as like a springboard onto exercise science right now. Like I liked this degree when I started, but now it is a springboard. So just to finish, where can people find you online? Where can people find De Novo? Where can people find your different projects?
I'm slightly more active. I can't promise how that will continue. I'm slightly more active on Instagram now. It's just at Ben Esgro.
Yeah.
We are at De Novo Sups on Insta.
Yep.
Website is denovosups.com.
Yep.
You can really, those are probably the easiest places to reach me. And that's really the best real-time updates you'll get on what I'm working on or anything like that. And then if someone wants to reach out to me direct, you can just get me through there.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Student Side Hustle. I would appreciate so much if you would leave a review if you'd like to hear more of what I'm saying. Then I would love if you would follow me on Instagram or check out my other social media, all linked in the show notes. And again, I would just like to say thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful evening and study hard.